Welcome to part 3 of the information crisis. Today we examine the knife-edge future, a portfolio of hope.
All right, so you've given us quite the collection this time around. We're going to be taking a deep dive into your articles and notes on forecasting global challenges. Specifically, we'll be focusing on this problem of misinformation and the increasingly polarized world we seem to be living in.
Definitely a lot to unpack here. Two of the most fascinating documents you shared, forecasting global challenges and potential catalysts, and that global misinformation and polarization, trends, impacts, and potential shocks report. Both really interesting because they consider some pretty radical solutions and, importantly, the likelihood that anyone will actually implement them.
Absolutely. So our mission in this deep dive is to pull out those really key insights and give you a shortcut to understanding what a complex and potentially dangerous situation this is without getting bogged down in too much detail.
And you'll see it's not just about what's going on or even what the best solutions are. It's about who might be in a position to actually do something about it. And critically, what would motivate them to act.
So speaking of action, one of the first things the AI tackles is the likelihood of different individuals and organizations actually stepping up to address misinformation and polarization before things get really, really bad, before some huge crisis hits.
Yeah.
So what did it find?
Well, right off the bat, the AI uses its odds maker assessment and casts a pretty wide net. It looked at a whole bunch of different entities, and the average likelihood it came up with for anyone proactively engaging with the problem was right around 55%.
So basically a coin toss. 55% chance that anyone's going to actually take on this mess before it blows up in our faces. It doesn't exactly inspire a lot of confidence, does it?
Yeah.
But I guess there were some that the AI saw as more likely to step up to the plate early on.
You bet. The AI flagged a few key players that it gave a high likelihood rating to. For example, journalist Maria Ressa got a really strong 90% confidence rating. Then there was the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, that's ISD, which came in at 85%. And then MeDan, the tech nonprofit that's doing a lot of work to support journalism and digital literacy, they were at 80%.
Which, when you think about it, makes a lot of sense. All three have been on the front lines of this fight for years now.
Yeah.
So what was the AI's reasoning for giving them such high marks?
It all boils down to the work they're already doing and the fact that they clearly get just how serious the stakes are. For Ressa, it's her direct experience with disinformation campaigns and her tireless efforts to defend the truth. For ISD, it's the fact that they're out there every day grappling with extremism and misinformation. And with MeDan, it's their laser focus on building these practical tools that can actually help us fight back.
So who's on the other end of the spectrum? Who did the AI flag as less likely to act proactively?
Yeah, well, as you might expect, it's those big tech platforms like Meta, that's Facebook, of course, and Google, specifically YouTube. The AI gave them a much lower probability of taking preemptive action, 38% for Meta and only 35% for YouTube.
I can't say I'm surprised. They've gotten a lot of heat for being more reactive than proactive.
Yeah.
So what was the AI's thinking on why these giants might be slower to the draw?
Well, it basically comes down to the fact that they're these huge, complex organizations with very different business models, and they're constantly under pressure from regulators. They also just seem to be hardwired to respond to crises as they pop up instead of really getting ahead of the curve and tackling the deeper systemic issues. They need to see a direct and immediate threat to their bottom line or their reputation before they'll really move quickly and decisively.
So the takeaway here seems to be that the smaller, more agile groups who are already knee-deep in the fight are more likely to act early. The big guys, though, the ones with the most resources and the widest reach, well, they might need a bigger wake-up call before they really commit to finding solutions.
Right. And that actually leads us to the next stage of the AI's analysis, which it called a gap analysis. Basically, it took that same group of organizations and individuals and asked, okay, assuming they haven't really thought about some of those more radical solutions we saw in the first document, things like using AI to have better online conversations or building entirely new ways to figure out what's true and what's not, how do we get them to the table?
So the AI tried to figure out what it would actually take to bridge the gap between what these players are already doing and those really ambitious ideas.
Exactly. And it did this in a really systematic way. For each player, it looked at their current work, figured out where they were falling short in terms of embracing those more radical approaches, and then proposed a specific engagement strategy to close that gap and get them interested.
Okay, so let's walk through some examples. Say you've got someone like Maria Ressa, who's spent her career fighting for truth and accountability in journalism. What kind of engagement strategy did the AI suggest for her?
Well, for Ressa, given her focus on journalistic integrity, the AI suggested a collaboration centered around developing AI tools that could help strengthen journalistic practices and actively fight misinformation. The idea is to show her how these cutting-edge technologies could directly support and even amplify the work she's already doing.
So it's a very natural progression from what she's already focused on. Okay, what about an organization like ISD, which is all about understanding and countering extremism? What did the AI cook up for them?
For ISD, the AI went a little more outside the box. Since they're already experts on extremist narratives, it suggested partnering on some pilot projects that would use immersive technologies, things like virtual reality. The thinking here is that these types of experiences could actually help people develop more empathy and understanding for others, which could potentially address the root causes of polarization and extremism in a way that complements their current research and policy work.
Wow, using tech to build empathy. That's pretty interesting. And what about Medan, with their expertise in building tech for fact-checking and media literacy?
The AI suggested exploring whether Medan could adapt its existing platforms to support a sort of decentralized ledger, what you might call a trust blockchain, for verifying information. This would allow people to assess the authenticity of information across all sorts of different domains. It's a much more systemic approach, but it builds directly on what Medan is already doing to strengthen journalism and fight misinformation.
So each of these strategies is tailored to the specific strengths and interests of each group. What about someone like the Hewlett Foundation, a major philanthropic player that's already poured a lot of money into fighting polarization?
For them, the AI proposed showcasing the effectiveness of what are called crisis-triggered global citizen assemblies, basically models for collective decision-making during major crises. The engagement strategy would focus on highlighting how funding these types of assemblies aligns perfectly with Hewlett's goal of promoting collaboration and bridging divides in society.
These are some pretty specific and strategic approaches. It sounds like the AI really thought carefully about how to get each of these groups on board with these more transformative ideas.
It definitely did. And it went even further, actually crafting personalized pitches for these key individuals and organizations. Pitches that were designed to really grab their attention and speak directly to their motivations.
So like a direct appeal that lays out the benefits and shows them how these big, ambitious ideas could actually help them achieve their existing goals.
Exactly. It was all about hooking their interest by showing them how they could make an even bigger impact by embracing these new approaches.
I'm dying to hear some of these pitches. What were some of the most interesting ones the AI came up with?
Well, one that stood out was aimed at Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister. It highlighted Taiwan's success with digital democracy and suggested that she could position Taiwan as a global leader by basically exporting these innovations to other democracies who are struggling with misinformation. Another fascinating pitch was for Vitalik Buterin, the guy behind Ethereum. It proposed that the same principles behind Ethereum's trust mechanisms could be used to build much broader reality validation systems that would go way beyond the crypto world.
I mean, those sound like they would definitely get people thinking. It just goes to show how important it is to frame these big disruptive ideas in a way that resonates with what people are already passionate about.
Exactly. The AI was trying to bridge the gap between the radical and the relevant to boost the chances that people would actually take these ideas seriously. But then the analysis took a bit of a turn, getting into more speculative territory. It started asking, okay, based on everything we've seen, how do we think this is all actually going to play out?
So considering how likely each group is to act, the gaps in their understanding, and these targeted pitches, what's the AI's best guess for the future?
The AI predicted a three-phase progression. First, it thinks we're already in a phase of continued fragmentation. There are all these well-intentioned efforts happening, but they're mostly isolated and lack a cohesive vision or any real coordination.
So lots of individual projects and small-scale initiatives, but nothing that's going to fundamentally change the game.
Right. Then comes phase two, which the AI calls crisis-driven partial mobilization. This is where things start to get really bad, and we see a more widespread, but still incomplete, response. Think about things like reactive consortiums forming after some big disaster or a sudden influx of funding to address the problem, but still it's not a true systemic change.
So we only really get serious about it after something terrible has already happened.
Unfortunately, that's the prediction. And finally, we reach phase three, adaptation without resolution. This is where societies basically learn to live with a constant level of misinformation and polarization. We might see the formation of these little trust bubbles where people only consume information from sources they already agree with, and we develop our own personal coping mechanisms. But the underlying problems that caused all of this never really go away.
It almost sounds like we just give up and accept that things are broken. That's a pretty depressing thought. What does the AI say about our chances of actually succeeding with the approaches we're currently taking?
To be blunt, it's not optimistic. It gives us a 20–30% likelihood of success with the way we're doing things now. Basically, incremental actions and these isolated efforts just aren't going to cut it. The problem is too big and too deeply rooted for that.
That's pretty sobering. What about the consequences if we fail? If we don't manage to change course, what does the AI think will happen?
This is where things get really bleak. The AI says there's an 80–90% chance of serious societal harm if we stay on this track. We're talking about deep and growing divisions between people, a complete loss of faith in our institutions, democracies failing all over the world, public health crises spiraling out of control because of all the misinformation, and long-term economic instability because everyone's so uncertain about what's real and what's not.
It's like a worst-case scenario playing out. The AI is basically saying that our entire system could start to break down if we don't figure out a better way forward.
It's a stark warning, for sure. Which takes us to the next big question the AI explored. What kind of massive shock would it take to finally get everyone to work together on this? What kind of event could trigger the kind of large-scale action we need?
So what's the AI's prediction for that black swan event, the one that finally forces everyone's hand?
It points to a scenario it calls the synthesized crisis cascade, which it predicts could happen sometime between 2027 and 2030. Imagine a globally coordinated misinformation attack using super realistic deepfakes and timed to coincide with major elections, public health emergencies, and economic events all at the same time.
It's like a full-blown information war designed to create as much chaos and distrust as possible on multiple fronts.
Exactly. The AI thinks this kind of event with real-world consequences that everyone can see and the likely collapse of our current fact-checking systems would be the thing that finally pushes everyone into action. The sheer scale and the fact that it's happening everywhere at once would make it impossible to ignore. It would expose just how dangerous misinformation can be and force even the biggest, most hesitant players to acknowledge that the threat is real and systemic.
So it's a pretty scary scenario, but it might be the thing that finally wakes everyone up. What does the AI say about the chances of this kind of shock actually leading to real, meaningful action?
It puts the likelihood at 70–80%. The logic is that the impact of an event like this would be so overwhelming that it would create a sense of urgency across the board. Everyone would finally understand that doing nothing is no longer an option, even those who have been dragging their feet.
So not exactly a rosy picture. The AI seems pretty pessimistic about us changing course on our own, but it thinks there's a good chance we'll finally get our act together once a big enough crisis hits.
I think that's a fair assessment. It highlights just how big the gap is between where we are now and where we need to be to tackle this problem effectively.
So beyond these doom and gloom scenarios, the AI also did some research on specific individuals and groups it identified as potential leaders for addressing global information challenges. Who were some of the names that came up?
The AI cast a really wide net here, looking at people and organizations from all sorts of sectors. From the tech world, we have people like Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister who's done some amazing work on digital democracy, and Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, who's really pushing the boundaries of decentralized systems. In the philanthropic world, there's the Omidyar network, which includes Luminate, and the Open Philanthropy Project. Both have been very active in this space and are open to trying new approaches.
What about the research community and those organizations working directly with people on the ground?
In research, the AI highlighted the Center for Constructive Communication at MIT and the Santa Fe Institute, both known for their innovative work. For on-the-ground efforts, we have organizations like the International Fact-Checking Network and Braver Angels.
And it sounds like there were some less obvious candidates too, right?
Yeah. The AI actually considered the potential role of the forecasting community itself, groups like Religions for Peace that are doing work in religious diplomacy, and even, believe it or not, global gaming companies. The thinking there is that these companies have a ton of experience managing huge online communities and designing systems that encourage cooperation.
So a really diverse group of potential leaders with a wide range of skills and expertise. What was the AI's assessment of how likely each of these players was to actually act before a major crisis?
Well, it really varied. Someone like Audrey Tang, with her proactive approach and all the work she's done in Taiwan, got a pretty high score, 83%. The Open Philanthropy Project, because of their focus on mitigating big, potentially catastrophic risks, also got a good score, 79%. But then you have groups like Braver Angels and the International Fact-Checking Network who are doing important work but tend to be more reactive or have a more narrow focus, so their scores were lower. And the gaming companies, well, their business is first and foremost, so the AI didn't see them as particularly likely to jump into this preemptively.
It seems like the ones who are most likely to act early are those who already see information disorders as a huge systemic threat, or who are already known for being innovative and proactive.
Exactly. And the AI also factored in things like their strategic priorities, how open they are to experimentation, what kind of resources they have, and any limitations they might have because of the way their organization is structured. Taking all of that into account, it gave a surprisingly high probability, around 85%, that at least one of these major players will take meaningful action before a crisis hits. The AI seems to be suggesting that there's real potential for a collaboration and partnership between these diverse groups.
So maybe there's some hope after all. Despite all the challenges, it sounds like the right mix of people working together could actually make a real difference.
That's the optimistic takeaway. And to push that even further, the AI did one last piece of analysis, digging deeper into how to connect those wild ideas we talked about earlier with these potential leaders.
Yeah.
Matching up the right ideas with the right people.
So the AI played matchmaker. Try and figure out which of those big transformative ideas would be the best fit for each of these individuals or organizations based on their strengths and expertise.
Right. It looked at things like using AI to improve online discussions, developing new systems for verifying information, and using immersive technology to build empathy. And then it tried to figure out which of those ideas would resonate the most with each potential leader. And for each pairing, it analyzed how well they currently understood the idea, identified any gaps in their understanding, and then proposed a strategy for getting them fully on board.
Okay, let's hear an example. How did the AI match up a specific idea with a specific leader? And what was the strategy for getting them involved?
Well, for Audrey Tang and Taiwan's Digital Ministry, the AI thought that AI-mediated discourse environments would be a natural fit, given all the work they've already done on digital democracy. The strategy would be to frame this as an opportunity to expand on their existing Polis platform, which is already being used for online deliberation, by incorporating more sophisticated AI tools that could help people have more productive and inclusive conversations, even across cultural differences.
Makes sense. It builds directly on their existing work and leverages their strengths. What about someone like Vitalik Buterin and the Ethereum community? What idea did the AI pick for them?
The AI thought they'd be a great fit for reality validation systems, given their expertise in decentralized technologies. The strategy here would be to tie it back to Buterin's own writings on pluralism, suggesting that these systems could be a natural evolution of things like prediction markets. It could be a way to build a more robust system for verifying truth without requiring everyone to adopt cryptocurrency.
So in both cases, the AI really tried to find the most compelling angle to get these leaders thinking about these transformative ideas.
Absolutely. And if you step back and look at the big picture, it's clear that we're facing a really complex and urgent problem. We have a lot of talented people and organizations working on pieces of the puzzle, but making real progress requires overcoming some major obstacles.
And it sounds like the biggest hurdle is that we don't have a unified vision or a good way to coordinate all these different efforts.
That's right. And the AI's analysis suggests that unless something major happens to shake things up, we're heading down a path towards even more instability and a further breakdown of trust in our information systems.
So since the AI says there's a good chance of a big disruptive shock event happening, it makes me wonder what you, our listener, can do to prepare. What steps can you take individually or in your community to build resilience in the face of all this information disorder?
And thinking about those potential leaders we talked about, what role can ordinary citizens play in encouraging them to act now before it's too late? How can we push them to explore these more radical but potentially life-saving solutions before a crisis forces their hand?
Those are some pretty big questions to grapple with. We encourage you to keep exploring these issues and maybe go back and revisit those original sources with these new insights in mind. This deep dive is just the beginning of a conversation that we all need to be having.
You've been listening to Uncharted Territories, where human curiosity meets AI capability. This episode was a creation of the AI Plus Roundtable, blending insights from the human producers at Innovation Toronto, with analysis co-developed using powerful AI capabilities, tapping heavily into models such as ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, with support and contributions from a wide range of other AIs. Our main AI hosts are voiced by Notebook LM, along with additional voice contributions from Microsoft. A sincere thank you to everyone involved in this unique human-AI partnership. Continue exploring with us on Substack at airoad.substack.com for show notes, further reading, and more content. That's airoad.substack.com. Thanks for tuning in to this AI Plus Roundtable production. We hope you'll join us again as we continue charting the territory where human creativity and AI capability converge.